Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar organized by the European University Association, EUA, titled Leading Academic Career Assessment Reform, Multi-Level Perspectives on Culture, Engagement and Impact. My name is Maria Blanco, and I'm advisor at EUA, and I'm happy to be chairing this session. We have had over 260 registrations for this webinar, and it is a real pleasure for us to see such a strong interest in this topic. Before we start, I want to share some housekeeping notes. Please use the chat for greetings, technical issues, or other remarks, and use the Q&A section for questions to the speakers that we will address at the end of our discussion today. We also encourage you to participate in the reflections through polls during the session, which will appear on your screens. And if you can activate closed captions from the bottom right corner of the video player. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the platform after the session, together with the supporting documents that we refer to during the discussion. And I want to thank my colleagues Rita Moraes and Julia Durand, with whom we have prepared this webinar and who will be supporting today in the background. So before moving into the topic itself, I would like to briefly situate this discussion within EUA's broader work on leadership in higher education. Over the last years, EUA has worked on different projects focusing on leadership, such as Lotus or New Lead, and more recently through initiatives such as our Leadership Development Program. And through our work and through the discussions, one message has consistently emerged. European universities today and other higher education institutions are navigating multiple transformations simultaneously. The sustainability transition, digital and AI transformation, geopolitical uncertainty, and changing funding landscapes, and leading through deeper forms of European cooperation in initiatives such as, for example, the European University Alliances. From our work, we have come to understand leadership in higher education in the following dimensions that I would like to also introduce briefly. Because in this complex context, when we talk about leadership, we talk about values-based and purpose-driven leadership anchored in academic values, societal mission of universities and higher education institutions. We talk also about shared leadership, where academic and professional leaders work in partnership within institutions. We understand leadership that is collective, so institutions lead together through these complex transformations in networks, in partnerships, and leadership that is strategic and long-term, which helps to navigate uncertainty with a future outlook for institutions. And finally, leadership that is transformational, so it creates conditions for change, and relational, that aims to build trust, engagement, and legitimacy. This vision of leadership is part of EUA's vision document, Universities Without Walls, and has driven EUA's recent work on leadership, including the development of the first European Leadership Development Program, which aims to create a space where senior university leaders can collectively reflect on institutional transformation, complexity, and change with a distinctly European perspective. So in this context of our work, without a doubt, one of the current reforms that can illustrate these leadership challenges more clearly is that of academic career assessment reform. Alongside this broader work on leadership, EUA has been very closely involved in European discussions on academic careers and research assessment reform. And this includes both through the CoARA Working Group on Academic Careers and also on EUA's own work on attractive and sustainable academic careers, identified also as a strategic priority in the vision document, Universities Without Walls. These resources that I'm sharing will also be uploaded to the platform after today's session for those interested in exploring these discussions further. And in particular, through the work of the CoARA Working Group on Academic Careers, which EUA co-led with partners across Europe, an important discussion emerged around how assessment systems shape not only academic careers, but also institutional cultures, incentives, and the broader direction of higher education. And these discussions within the working group also highlighted that assessment reform cannot be separated from broader questions around institutional culture, career attractiveness, working conditions, incentives, and leadership. And this is precisely why academic career assessment has increasingly emerged as one of the major transformational leadership challenges that currently higher education institutions are facing. Across Europe, universities, research centers, funders, national authorities are rethinking how academic work is assessed, recognized, and incentivized. At the same time, implementation remains difficult. In fact, this has been very present in recent European level discussions at the high-level conference of December 2025, organized under the Danish EU presidency on research assessment reform. There was a very clear message that the challenge is no longer defining or committing to principles, but implementing them, and that this requires leadership and coordination across levels. And similarly, in recent exchanges within the third CoARA National Chapters Forum, celebrated in March 2026 in Madrid, leadership emerged again as a central issue, particularly when thinking about how to translate shared commitments into institutional practice. So in many ways, today's session aims to contribute to that broader discussion. And what makes this discussion particularly interesting and also challenging is that reform requires leadership at multiple levels. So from national frameworks, quality assurance bodies, to university associations, then at the institutional level with universities, institutions, and also leadership from the research communities themselves. And these levels do not always move at the same speed, nor in the same direction. So today, rather than discussing reform in abstract terms, we want to focus on implementation and real leadership dilemmas. So our aim is to make this conversation as practical and honest as possible, drawing also on your experiences from the audience, for which, as I mentioned before, we will invite your input through a couple of short live polls. And today we are very fortunate to have in this conversation perspectives from across systems, across institutions that have been very active in advancing academic career assessment reform in the recent years. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to Irene Ramos Vielva. Irene brings a national quality assurance and policy perspective into this discussion. Irene works as an advisor for the Spanish National Agency for Quality Assessment and Accreditation, ANECA. And from this position, she also co-leads the Spanish National Chapter of CoARA, and she is also a member of the CoARA Steering Board. Irene is a research fellow at the Institute for Advanced Social Studies within the Spanish National Research Council, CSIC. She has a background in political science and sociology and has mainly researched in the area of research and innovation policy. Her research interests include knowledge transfer processes, societal targeted research funding, the societal value of research, open innovation in science, and gender in science-society interactions. She has advised for governmental agencies at both regional and national level, and as an expert on R&I policy for the European Commission. And she's also an honorary residential academic fellow for the Technical University of Denmark, DTU Entrepreneurship. So thank you, Irene, for being with us today. Our second speaker is Ragnar Lee, who will bring a university associations perspective. Ragnar is senior advisor at Universities Norway, the Norwegian Rectors Conference, working on topics such as research policies, open science, research administration, research security, innovation, career policies, and leadership development. He is the coordinator of the Norwegian National Chapter and has been central in the development of the Norwegian Career Matrix NORCAM, a tool for reforming academic research assessment, which is currently being implemented in Norwegian universities and higher education institutions. So thank you, Ragnar, also for being with us in this discussion today. Our third speaker is Andreas Ragaut. He will bring an institutional leadership perspective to the discussion. Andreas is Director for Performance and Quality Management at the University of Graz in Austria. He is responsible for the strategic development and planning of the university, performance improvements, institutional research, and the quality management system. One of the focal points of his work is the connection between quality management and the university's steering and performance system. And Andreas is also the representative of the University of Graz in CoARA and was a member of the Academic Career Assessment Working Group that I mentioned before. Within the European University Alliance ARCUS, Andreas is also a co-lead of the ARCUS Development Unit and a member of the Task Force on Reforming Research Assessment. And Andreas is also an alumni of the first cohort of EUA's Leadership Development Program. So thank you, Andreas, very much for joining us also in this conversation. And finally, I would like to introduce Maria Piatila, who brings the vision and the perspective of an early career researcher's voice. Maria is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Eastern Finland and also works part-time at Tampere University. Her research interests include academic careers, researcher assessment, university governance, and gender equality and diversity in academia. She has conducted research on research assessment and has been a member of the Finnish working group on responsible research assessment. And she was also involved in the UFERing project within the UFE European University Alliance, where a new portfolio was developed to support the identification of researchers' skills and contributions. She has participated in the development of the national level guidelines and tools for responsible research assessment in Finland and has played a very active role in promoting research assessment reform within the UFE Alliance. So we are very happy to count with these different perspectives today, which connected are necessary to advancing this reform, as I mentioned previously. So in this first part of the session, I would first like to invite each of our panelists to offer a short opening reflection from their own perspective and experience, and maybe briefly introduce the work they have been carried out from their different positions. We have asked them to reflect on some of the leadership tensions and practical challenges that emerge when moving from commitment to implementation. So with that, let me first turn to Irene. Annika and the work of the agency is advancing both internally and within the Spanish system as co-lead of the Spanish National Chapter is becoming an important reference point across Europe. So Irene, could you please provide us with a brief overview of this work that you are leading and maybe some initial reflections around leadership dilemmas or maybe unexpected challenges that you have encountered in this process?
Okay, thank you, Maria. Good afternoon to the audience. First, thanks to the organizers for the invitation to participate in this webinar. I'm glad to share ANECA's experience with academic career assessment reform, where we started, what we are changing, and what we are still learning. But let me first very briefly introduce ANECA, which is the Spanish National Agency for Quality Assessment and Accreditation. It is a public body linked to the Ministry of Science, Innovation and Universities, and at the same time it develops its functions independently. Its mission is to carry out evaluation, certification and accreditation activities in the Spanish university system with the final aim of quality improvement through the application of the criteria and guidelines for quality assurance within the European higher education area and the European research area as key references. For that purpose, ANECA also works together with other quality agencies in national and international networks in Europe, in the Ibero-American area, and globally. Internally, ANECA has two main divisions. The first one is devoted to university degrees and institutional assessment, and the second one focuses on academic staff evaluation. And here is where the academic research reform has been taken place. This division has two main programs. One is compulsory, is the accreditation for university teaching bodies to be able to access the university calls for academic positions as lecturer and professor. The merits assessed here are research, teaching, knowledge transfer, and since the last reform, also leadership experience to obtain accreditation to full professor. The second program is a voluntary recognition of 6-year research periods, is the so-called Sesenio. It works as a reward system for individual performance and has been running in the country for the last 35 years. It's a national call in which 6-year periods of research activity are assessed on the basis of 5 contributions selected by the candidate, which mean a salary bonus, but also recognition and prestige among peers. And these two programs have been reformed. And here you can see different elements interacting and shaping this reform. I particularly would like to highlight that at the policy level, there was a new national regulatory framework with a new law of the university system, a national strategy on open science, and a new general regulation for accreditation. Which created facilitating conditions for this reform. And at the same time, with the new director of ANECA, Pilar Paneque, the agency became a signatory to DORA and CoARA, and this was also reflected in the reform. Because the reform responded to local needs, but it was also aligned with a wider reform movement, as you can see based on the key changes that this reform implied. For instance, the development of new evaluation criteria aligned with the CoARA commitments, the incorporation of a new standardized narrative CV model in combination with the responsible use of quantitative indicators and the simplification of the process. But the reform also included measures to guarantee equal opportunities and the recognition of diversity in terms of academic profiles, stages in the career, disciplinary practices and languages. And the last block refers to the participation of the community in the design and implementation of the reform, also a group of experts. and strong support for open science and citizen science. And the last point refers to the revision of the composition of the assessment commissions to include new profiles, for instance, an expert on gender equality and on interdisciplinarity in each commission. But of course, the reform also requires action and alignment at different levels. I won't go in detail, but just to provide an overview, at internal level, ANECA is working through a CoARA action plan and a strategic plan after a self-reflection exercise and the identification of institutional priorities. At the national level, we continue in close interaction with the university and the scientific community, but we also participate in the coordinating group of the CoARA national chapter, which reveals us a platform and a space for collaboration across institutions. And we also contribute to broader exchanges internationally. ANECA's reform was one of the case studies analyzed by the working group on reforming academic career assessment. And we have also received funding support for a project on experiments with evaluators to obtain evidence base to refine and revise our reform for institutional change. And preliminary results of these experiments will be discussed in academic conference next month. And just to conclude, some reflections from our experience with the reform. One dilemma emerging from this experience is to keep a clear direction of the reform, but also combine it with certain flexibility, because it's also needed some space to advance, consolidate, revise and refine the reform in an iterative process. A potentially underestimated barrier is the real cost of capacity building, given that changing assessment practices require sustained time, effort, and institutional energy. So to overcome these difficulties, one enabling a strategy is a shared commitment. So people need to understand the reform, trust it, and participate in it. So community interaction is crucial for this. And what we still need to do is to better connect this reform with broader institutional transformation. This involves anticipating new challenges, but also addressing transversal implications, as the reform involves a cultural change in how institutions recognize, support, and value academic work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irene, for this overview of the work and the leadership of ANECA, and for already pointing to several points that I am sure that will come back in our reflections today. So now I would like to invite Ragnar Lie, to give a first overview. Universities in Norway and the NORCAM framework have become an important reference point in European discussions around assessment reform. So from your experience coordinating this work across institutions, maybe if you could provide some initial reflections on these leadership dilemmas or barriers, and maybe that have stood out to you for you in this work, this period.
Thanks a lot, Maria, and thanks for the invitation. I think this is a timely topic, and not least linking the leadership perspectives with kind of the practical and implementation challenge that we have going forward. We in Norway, we were kind of fortunate that we started working practically and strategically already in 2019 and put together a committee with a majority of academic renowned people from our community. The Rectors Conference is another, it's a kind of a soft law nudging but not instructing institution, and our role is not to point but to recommend and to fact find and to bring people together on important and not least topics that are emerging. So this was an emerging topic. We foresaw that something was going to happen concerning open science and a lot of other things that said to us that something is happening with the research assessment framework. So we put together this committee that worked out the proposal of a kind of a further developed framework for assessing academic careers and also accessing proposals for research. We brought together also the Research Council in Norway, so the funders were there. So this, when then the CoARA came about, we have had already started to get the institutions on board on the thinking of doing something together. So it was a no-brainer to engage in the CoARA process, and of course it also made it very much easier to talk about this nationally when this grew as an international an international movement, so to speak. So and then we have the status of this in Norway now is that almost all of our institutions and all the main ones, the large ones, have implemented their own version of the NORCAM framework, and is kind of about to make it happen in concrete terms. And there are some challenges and some hurdles, of course. For one thing is to agree on that we will go in this direction, and we agree to this, and especially on the leadership level. Another thing is to really make it happen. And then to illustrate some of that is to present my preliminary comments on the four challenges that we have got from EUA here. So the first one is one leadership dilemma that stands out for us in the assessment reform, and I think one that I want to pick is for the leadership to argue convincingly that the reform process is not about compromising on academic quality, because that is an argument we sometimes get. One thing is to argue, but another thing is to argue convincingly. And this is a challenge for the leadership because there are cultures that points in some other directions. For instance, practically, what should we do about the university rankings that are kind of making it kind of double standards if the rectors and the leadership of an institution is celebrating that they have risen a couple of places in the university rankings, that make mixed signals and is not aligned with the CoARA principles. So that's a concrete dilemma, concrete example. And it's hard also to exit the university's rankings, although some institutions have actually done that. One underestimated barrier, it's a known one, but I think the differences between academic fields cannot be overestimated because they are there, and we have to take it into account. So the question is what to do about it. The laggers, so to speak, should they decide, or should the kind of those who wants to go forward decide, or something in between? So what is too much diversity and flexibility within an institution, and then within a country, and then globally? So they will come back to that, I guess. And how far can we get with nudging? Soft law, hard law. There's a CoARA Act coming up. Should we kind of use a bit kind of stronger gloves in this? I kind of doubt that, but let's talk about that. One practical enabling strategy that has helped us, and I would say bring the HR people along. This is not only for the leadership, it's not only for the research administration and the academic community, but the HR are the doers. They write this down and they make rules and regulations in an institution. And we have a great success bringing them along. One next question that leaders must face is the last one, and that is how to realign the way evaluation committees really work. And talking about the HR, they are making kind of regulations of how what they should consider when they assess, and if they follow that, they actually change practice. But they don't always follow that, so that is something that is a process that we are into now. Should they be coursed? Should they be instructed in a different way, and how to do that without pushing the academic community too far? So I think that is a kind of start introduction from me, and I look forward to discuss this further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ragnar, for your input also from the Norwegian context, which is, I think, also pointing to several difficulties and challenges that I think will come back indeed further a little bit later in the discussion. So I would like to now invite Andreas. We move into the institutional level. And Andreas, from your perspective, from your experience at the University of Graz, where are the main tensions that have emerged when institutions try to implement reform internally? What are the challenges that you have faced?
Yeah, thanks also from my side for the invitation to present and discuss our Graz approach. Just to begin, some words about our university. The University of Graz is a comprehensive full university, except of medicine and technical subjects. It's the second oldest university founded in Austria, founded in the 16th century. And with this long traditional background and comprehensiveness of the subjects, it's one of the challenges we expected to face in the development of the research assessments. When I say in the development, then I have to go back into the late 20s, so 28, 29, where we started at our university to discuss how to measure, or before we measure, what we are expecting from our researchers in their doing in the research, in teaching, in outreach, service to the society, and started to develop some internal indicators, issues, what we are expecting from them, try to measure them, but with a very small focus on the usage of this information. So only more or less for reporting to the ministry to get more, collect more data, and on a professor's level for the performance-related salaries, to have a number which they should reach to get the salary later on, also for tenure track professors to have some criteria. So in this time when we began with this discussions and implementation, we also were more or less have had the feeling to stand alone, so doing this for ourselves. But hey, others do not do the same things. Only publications and third-party funding is counting for a career at another university, another research institution abroad or in Austria. So that is was a little bit tricky to implement these reforms. But then came CoARA, and with this a great push to level up our activities, and especially our approach towards the expectations. So we said internally, before we reform the assessment of research and researchers, we have to clarify what we are expecting from this. And similar, as Rainer told us from Norway, we internally developed a so-called activity framework, where we stated in 8 items what we are expecting from all our researchers at the different career levels. I have to commit, NORCAM was one of the inspiring good examples internationally how to do this and how to proceed on this issue. So we try to create a systematic approach towards these expectations. We set up an university internal framework, but with adaptations to the different cultures in the fields of research. Humanities have another culture of working ideas, etc., than for example the natural sciences. We also established or built up a dashboard to show the performance of the researchers. And at the moment, we are adapting the internal recruiting and assessment processes towards this activity framework. And then leading directly to the 4 questions, I think the great leadership dilemma for us was expected, and it also occurred in reality, the cultural change. So when we said, hey, it's a totally new system of expectations towards all the researchers, which was developed and implemented top-down, so from the rectorate to the faculties, to the departments. It is a cultural clash with the long Austrian, Central European tradition of very strong professors with high rate of internal or individual autonomy. And then the directorate came and said, oh, all professors have to do, or all the researchers have to do this or that. So there was for us, clearly, this is much more of a cultural change and cultural advancement connected with this development. And so we have to think about this, how to manage this cultural part of the implementation of the activity framework. And you can see here, there were a lot of different measures taken to improve, to think about how to involve, as Ragnar also mentioned, administrative units, how to create an understanding between the faculties, between the departments of what is their performance criteria, their quality criteria. There were concerns about the quality or excellence approach, etc. So that leads to our enabling. One of the enabling strategies was to hire an expert in change management. So it was an external person, but hired by the university, who gave us ideas how to manage this. Had a good, because he was not in the university bubble before, outstanding view on our blind spots, and on the other hand, also accepted in the departments as a neutral person. So with this, we could find a way how to deal with this cultural changes within our university. And also the barriers which come along with this was on this cultural part, mainly the time and the effort and the energy, the top level, the rector, the vice rector, and others have to invest into the convincing, critical, skeptical people within the university. So a lot of discussions, bilateral meetings, dinners, working groups, meetings, etc., were set up and time-consuming to convince these people and to bring up the added value with this new activity framework. Do the work of researchers and very special this value for the young researchers. Last question connecting with this is, what are the future development, or what are we going? What have to think about in the future, which is already here in Austria, to be honest, is how to include more the teaching parts of a university person into this research assessment or researchers assessment. So the most universities teaching is a greater part and important part of the work of researchers, of academics. So how to include qualitative assessment into the overall assessment of research and researchers. It's an ongoing internal and also an Austrian discussion. So that's for my part for the first question.
Thank you very much, Andreas. And this, this experience really starts showing us that how assessment reform quickly becomes a broader organizational and leadership challenge that involves governance, incentives, communication, institutional culture. So thank you very much for sharing this. And finally, I would like to invite Maria to also help us move into the researchers' perspective and the perspective of the researchers community and the academic community, because this reform ultimately concerns how researchers experience academic careers, recognition, expectations in practice. So from your perspective and from your experience, could you provide some initial reflections on some of the leadership dilemmas or barriers that you have encountered?
Sure, and thank you also on my behalf for the invitation, and thank you for the other speakers. It's been really interesting to hear your briefings. So I will try to make use of some of the findings of my gained during my own research work, and also some more practical work gained during my work related to the topic of researcher assessment at a Finnish university, and also some work at other levels. And I also think some of the points I have are quite similar to what has already been said. But when I think about universities, one leadership dilemma that comes to my mind deals with how fragmented organizations universities are, as was already pointed out. So power is spread out, and to make real changes happen, requires that many people are on board, and you can't impose something like CoARA top down, but it has to be taken up across the organization. But at the same time, I still think it is quite important that somebody at the organizational level also takes clear responsibility. So ideally, I think there should be a visible person at a university who takes the lead, somebody people listen to and respect. So I think that top leaders like rectors can signal what is important and give legitimacy to changes related to sustainable research culture. But of course, people like these, they cannot intervene or control everyday processes and decisions that take place. But this highlights the important role of other people, professors, senior researchers overall. But I think also the role of professional service staff, which was also mentioned before. I think they also have been very important also in Finland in developing processes that at least make it more probable that things are run in a transparent and more equitable way. So I think one challenge is balance, that you need clear leadership at the top, but also this kind of shared responsibility across the organization. And then if I think more about the early career researchers and the underestimated barriers, so I think, well, you know that this is a career phase where there's a lot of insecurity. So many people work on short-term funding, and we know from research that there's a lot of pressures, for example, for postdocs to primarily focus on their research productivity in order to gain new funding or employment. So at the same time, many people would actually be interested in focusing also on other things like this societal outreach and so on. But this can then feel risky as it takes time if you do other things, and it's not always recognized when people then apply for research funding or jobs. So this is a question of incentives and time. And I think also the role of supervisors should be pointed out, as early career researchers are often closely attached to their research groups, and the supervisors or PIs, they have a lot of influence. They communicate their priorities in academic work, how research or academic work in general should be organized in terms of allocating your time resources and so on. So even if there are these new good policies or principles introduced, it may of course be that the supervisors may still reinforce these more traditional expectations. One practical thing that might help, if I again think about early career researchers, is having longer contracts. I think they would provide then more flexibility for researchers to do also other things than pure research, like communicating your research with wider audiences, and also enable more opportunities, provide more opportunities to focus also more on research quality than just productivity. And yes, and then the last part we were kind of encouraged to discuss here was what are the next questions leaders should face. So I think one thing is that academic careers, they are still very individualistic, and career paths tend to be narrow. So we tend to assess everyone using the same criteria, as if all researchers should follow the same path and have the same profile. But we know, of course, that people have different strengths and different passions. Some are strong in method, some in conceptual work, some in teaching, and so on. So, and not everyone is motivated by competition. Maybe this kind of abilities or opportunities to also support others and contribute to a team should be taken into account, as this kind of contribution may remain invisible if we only focus on individuals and their productivity, so to say. My son, for example, he plays soccer, and we keep saying to him that everyone in the team is important and their roles complement each other. So one thing, one possible direction also in academia could be to think more in terms of teams. So departments or research groups having different complementary strengths and profiles, and that would allow people to build on what they are good at. And I think that would also be motivating for many researchers, and that would actually also strengthen the collective. But yes, maybe I'll end here.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much for providing this vision, which I think is also very important for our discussion today. So I want to invite all our speakers to start the joint panel discussion with a broader reflection question for each of them. So starting with Irene. Irene, you have mentioned your work within the Spanish national chapter briefly, and reflecting a little bit further on this interinstitutional collaboration and coordination, what do you think are the biggest leadership dilemmas when coordinating reform across multiple institutions and within the entire system?
Well, one important dilemma in a national context, I think, is how to share a common direction while integrating different institutional needs and perspectives. For instance, there are now 93 institutions being part of the Spanish national chapter, and they are quite diverse, not only in the type of organization, but also they move at different speeds, and were early adopters, and others are just starting. So in that sense, the national chapter has acted as a kind of connector within the system, creating a space for trust building, coordination, knowledge exchange, and mutual learning. One key output was a mapping report of institutional reform initiatives, which was published last summer, and this was led by Maria Blanco, and this was an important first collective step. It made progress visible, and also helped to highlight emerging trends. For instance, the growing importance of interdisciplinarity, or shared challenges like the importance of awareness and evaluator training. And now we are working in integrating those initiatives into a shared repository. During the last CoARA National Chapter Forum in Madrid, we observed that this is similar in other countries. So I will say that general national frameworks can guide the change and the reform, but definitely institutional autonomy is needed for ownership.
I think this links well also to the experience of Ragnar in Norway, which is also a case of leading reform at a national level. So you have talked about it in a shared narrative, different rhythms, and the development of tools that can serve as guidelines or a guide at a national level to encourage the reform. So Ragnar, how did you build this shared narrative, which you have also mentioned at the beginning as one of the first challenges or dilemmas in Norway, and that trust among diverse institutions, especially when the reform touches more sensitive issues like the ones that you mentioned before, across different disciplinary areas?
Yes, as I mentioned, Universities Norway is a bottom-up institution, and we have to. We don't have to pretend. We must not pretend that we are otherwise. But one thing that was quite important was that the leadership of this working group making the NORCAM framework, he was recruited from at that time, the biggest and at least the oldest and broad-based University of Oslo. And he also was leading kind of a parallel working group internally at. So when we were finished with the report, that could be almost kind of not automatically, but kind of in a parallel worked out in at the University of Oslo. So they were also in our framework was ahead of the curve and an early mover. That was not that usual. That the most kind of, in a way, the conservative, largest, oldest university was reforming first, but they were, and then when the others coming along, we made a platform that everyone could share practice. Many of the others, they copied the versions of what the University of Oslo had done, and that is kind of a fortunate process. So what if the University of Oslo could do it, kind of everyone should not be afraid of doing it. And we used the same when we saw that something was going to happen before CoARA. We cooperated and we had a nice cooperation with the Netherlands and Finland, which kind of worked also in the same area with kind of open science and research process and recognition and reward process in Netherlands and so on. And then we could say that if Finland and Netherlands can do it, it's not dangerous for us to do it. And then kind of, so that was also a narrative internally in the strategic units. So I think that was and also another point, what is leadership in this? It's not only the rectors. It's you and me as well. And this concept of shared leadership that the EUA is using, and we are using it also. And we use it in, for instance, EARMA and the research managers events and courses. And leadership is a lot, and like Maria said, I mean, working in teams, we all lead, but we lead complementary, and it's not. This is not the hierarchical dimension does not solve work formally in this. It's the structure is more complex, and we should take aware of that. So,
thank you, Ragnar. And if we move to Andreas, you have talked about the difficulty of changing the culture internally. What do you think has been the hardest change to implement in your university? when trying to advance the reform?
I think the greatest challenge was to bring in. So there were two challenges: one internal and one external. So the internal was we have had 3,000 different expectations towards what should be in the framework, and the extreme positions or interests were from only 5 items by a top-level manager up to 200 plus items from a department, because they want to show all the kind of works they do as researchers and to get honored writing application letters, etc., like this. And the other tension extremely was between demanding a strong leadership from director, the deans, the head of departments, versus don't touch me, let me alone. So the very typical positions to bring it together and to change the cultural aspect. It wasn't the technical aspect, it was the cultural aspect as mentioned before, to deal with this. And then other external factor that is coming up to Ragnar's example of the University of Oslo. At least among the Austrian universities, we were the first movers. And all the other universities in Austria are looking at us. How do they proceed there? Some of them are waiting that would they fail to implement or develop and implement such a new framework or not, and what's going on in Graz. And after 2 years or something like this, or 2.5 years, when they see, okay, it's working, it's being implemented, there was no public, internal, etc., great resistance at the end, and we get also the okay from the union of the researchers for this framework. Then the others started to request that, oh, could you show us your framework? Could you explain? Could you send us the tables behind? We want to discuss this internally too and adapt it to our university. But this feeling of the first mover being observed very intensively by all the others, but also for the leadership, not so easy, because for sure sometimes thinking, okay, are doing we the right thing? Is this must we be the first movers? Should we wait until the others come with us? The oldest university in Austria, for example, or not, because there was a change in the rectorate there, and they from very favor of CoARA to very opposite of CoARA. So it was not easy for them to stay internally and externally behind this cultural change towards the reform. Being alone in this instance for a long time, lots of internal pressures, etc., from interest groups, and so that was the internal or the leadership tension at some levels, not only the top level alone, also for the deans becoming pressure from the departments, etc. But we involved them at different levels too. So the deans, deans of study were involved in developing this. Head of departments were part of this focus groups, etc. So shared leadership also on this level, including the administrative departments.
Mm-hmm. So we see already certain connections between your experiences, the idea of shared leadership, but also these first movers that you call, and how within the system you have different rhythms, and how that is difficult to also lead collectively as an interinstitutional example. And finally, Maria, to make the reform feel meaningful, the role of researchers and academics, as we have mentioned before, is critical. So in your opinion, what risks can emerge if moving forward, researchers' voices are maybe included too late in the process, or how do you see this in the change process?
Yes, thanks. Yes, first of all, I think the reform becomes meaningful when it becomes alive. So when it becomes integrated into how we plan our work, how we communicate our research, and so on, both as individuals and as a collective. So when I think about some examples, I remember listening some examples of researchers applying for research funding, for example, and them stating that, oh, it was so nice that this peer reviewer also mentioned my activities like committee work or editorial responsibilities or outreach activities. So these kinds of signals that also these kinds of activities were appreciated. So not only the research publications, for example. Well, I can also think of counter examples where when peer reviewers have mentioned the prestige of journals when reviewing research. But anyway, so when it's embedded in institutional research practices, and I also think that from an early career research perspective, integrating this CoARA discussion and CoARA work, which is going on into other kind of important topics related to attractiveness of academic careers, such as this topic of providing interesting career opportunities for researchers in academia. And yes, as you pointed out, I think it's risky if you kind of leave academics out of the process. One difficulty may be that maybe they're not always interested in becoming involved in these kinds of discussions, but you can at least try. And if you kind of frame it well enough, I think many people have a lot to say about these things, and they have also great ideas and want to be involved. But yes, and also I think that well, if you think about this topic of disciplinary differences, it was pointed out earlier by Andreas, I think, and I think you are more likely to get better outcomes if you integrate academics from different disciplines in these kinds of processes. So I think this integration of field-specific nuances is very important. And also this idea that change is more likely to be accepted if you reflect on it and are working on it together during the change.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before we go into the next questions, I would like to invite our audience to respond to our first question that should be popping up in your screens now, which is what is currently the biggest obstacle to academic career assessment reform in your institution? And we have left some options there that we have discussed with our panelists. So cultural resistance, lack of trust, maybe misaligned incentives or promotion practices, limited capacity in terms of skills, time, support structures, maybe lack of internal coordination across units, or maybe lack of clarity from the system level or external requirements. So we start seeing there on the screen first answers. I see that this cultural resistance that we were mentioning before, or maybe lack of trust, and that also links to the importance of strategic communication that I think we reflected on briefly already in our opening reflections, is standing out quite prominently in the responses. But I would like to invite panelists maybe to react, have an initial reaction to these responses, if they resonate with what you have seen. Irene or Andreas? Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Would start for sure with the highest ranked one, because this is an experience we also had at the beginning, that we expected a lot of cultural resistance against this. But it was very surprisingly that the resistance was from some people who were very loud. But the huge majority of the researchers very welcomed this development and applauded. Maybe very silent in bigger meetings, etc. I remember very intensively my visit at one of a meeting of the professors of a greater faculty. Where two or three professors very loud against this, having their former experiences abroad in mind, etc. And in the lunch break, 5 or 6 other professors comes to me. It's a very good idea, good direction. Please keep forward, etc. But they don't raise their hand in the official meeting. So this is one of the experiences we have had throughout the discussion, that was much more support from very silent people, and especially from the younger ones. We very welcomed them. We gave them at the other side and voice an opportunity to bring up their ideas, their concerns. Maybe they're there, but I think the cultural resistance is overestimated in reality because of the very loud people who formulate or articulate their resistance loudly. But that could be overcome by a strong, convincing leadership.
I've seen some nodding heads. Yes, Ragnar.
Yes, I totally agree with Andreas, and it may also be overrated, but it depends on what you mean with cultural resistance. For me, I don't think we should talk about cultural resistance to research assessment isolated, because this is a part of a bigger process. So with the kind of open science practices in a widely defined, it's a whole ecosystem that has to be changed, from funding and publishers and open access publications and so on. We had a lot more resistance to the Plan S than to CoARA and NORCAM. So I think that through that process, it kind of opened up an understanding that, okay, things are really changing. We don't know exactly what the end result is, but something is changing. So I think that has resonated into the culture, but how to do it and what it means in practice, also across fields, that is of course kind of part of the culture discussion in a way. So I think that this is something quite broader, and those who we have collaborated with some key people, individuals that have kind of advocated and showed academic fellows that this is really about a different way of doing research, doing academic activity. It's not only kind of putting electricity to a paper. It is not totally, but an evolved new way of doing research, more collaborative, more kind of engaged with society and all this. So it kind of the community gets a head around that and see this as an innovation, and not kind of losing the kind of the indicators for what they think is, or what they traditionally mean is quality. I think we are about to achieve something concrete.
Okay, I'm aware of time, so let us move into the next question. I want to reflect a little bit on within this context of maybe resistance and where we can find resistance when trying to advance this reform process. What do you think builds legitimacy and trust? So we have talked, for example, about involving already researchers earlier in the process, and maybe that can be something that builds legitimacy and trust in the process, in the reform process, and also a reflection on how this can be done across disciplines, across communities. And maybe Irene, yes?
Yeah, we also experienced some initial cultural resistance, but it also gradually decreased over time. And I think that a key issue is that the reform requires two parallel dimensions. One is the technical part, the methodological work, developing new criteria, tools that are clear and consistent and so on. But the other is clearly the involvement from the university and the scientific community. And for us, this participation has been essential, not only providing inputs and insights during the design of the reform, but also during the implementation of that reform. And a key example is that we recently launched a survey to around 500 people who was already evaluated under the new accreditation program, and we are also planning to conduct some individual interviews because to us their views, their experiences, and their proposals are very important to revise and improve this reform. So the feedback helps to make it more adequate, and also helps to the ownership of the reform.
Yes, indeed. Maria, maybe you would like to add to that?
Yes, maybe. Well, I just want to point out that from an early career researcher perspective, why not also from a researcher perspective more generally? I think, well, legitimacy comes from credibility and consistency mainly. So I think many researchers pay a lot of attention to what seemed to be really, what seemed to really count in some key processes like recruitment and funding, stuff like that. This is also a challenge because I also very much agree that it's more like a system level change. So we shouldn't pay too much attention to like these individual processes either. But I guess if you think about individuals, it's the things that he or she may think about is that how this affects me as an individual. Will I get promoted, or will I get funding and stuff like that? So I guess this has to do with from which perspective you are looking at this. But then if you think about the individual, then if you see that these new things or new principles like valuing open science, like Ragnar was pointing out, or teaching engagement, if these are reflected in some of these key decisions and not just in policy papers, then of course the kind of legitimacy increases, or the consistency of doing things also in practice. Yes, and of course the if researchers then see that, for example, earlier career researchers see that there's this CoARA talk, but my senior colleagues are still very much focusing on these quantitative metrics in research, for example, the message becomes a little bit contradictory, I guess.
Yes, and maybe now we can move from culture, building legitimacy, trust, resistance to change to more additional dimensions in the implementation around capacity building or internal coordination. Within your institutions and from your experience, what choices in terms of coordination, in terms of capacity building, would you think have helped to build, to create this to advance in the reform within your institution? So I think Irene mentioned at the beginning that one of the maybe unexpected or the most difficult challenges was about the training and capacity building. So maybe if we can start with you, Irene.
Yeah. Well, for capacity building, of course, this required adding more staff and improving the IT tools. But beyond that, it also implied further internal coordination and the promotion of a shared understanding of the reform. So for that, we established regular staff meetings, internal seminars, some other awareness raising activities in order to keep the teams involved and aligned with the reform. Another two important aspects were also the distribution of responsibilities. So everyone understands the role in the reform, and some specialization because this can be needed for developing different parts of the reform. So I think it's quite important internally to strengthen the implementation in these different ways to facilitate and ensure consistency and quality of the reform.
And maybe, Andreas, I think in your presentation you also mentioned that importance of coordinating internally across the institution. So maybe if you have some reflections around this internal coordination and how you did this and how you used this.
On the one hand, we have a lot of working groups on a different level, different career stages, also involving the administrative departments and how they are affected and how they could contribute to this reform. How do they adapt their honoring systems, for example, didactics improvements combined with performance, etc. So that's wasn't key. Also to include the academics to take over the ownership of the items for their subject was key, so that they could have the nuances for their subject developed, discussed, and adapted within the given framework for the subject. And third point, or the other point, was that we have hired the own person to coordinate, lead, organize all this stuff around the development and implementing of the activity framework. So that one person is only responsible for this development, is the one single point of conversation, etc., where people came to them and ask to her, or she is providing trainings, webinars, etc., internally, how to use this instrument, for example, in appraisal interviews, etc. So that is the chain of expectations, assessment, appraisal interviews, honoring is closed. and she is the one person responsible for the whole cycling, so to say.
As we move to the final minutes of this webinar, I would like to briefly go through the questions that we have received in the Q&A section from our audience. So one of the questions is for you, Andreas. What was the added value brought by a change management expert, and how was that received by the university community? If you can tell us a bit more about this.
Yeah, we hired the person from externally, and that's one of the criteria when we looked for this person, that he or she also have a professional background in change management, not coming out of the university bubble. So that, as mentioned before, could go into the blind spots in our communication. He then built up how to create the information chain, not only the information materials, but also when to disseminate what, whom to involve at what stage, etc. Also to discover communication gaps. So when we thought the communication is going well, because the rector or the vice rector, the deans have communicated it, but from the researchers, he got the feedback or the hidden or the very light indicators. Oh, that was not understood by them, or there is some little resistance coming from there. Be aware of that. So this professional external view, although he was hired by the university, was the very high added value and additional workforce for sure to do this.
Very interesting, yes. Maybe if we move to the next question, because we have been talking a lot about reluctance to change in different fields. So one question from Jose Navarro is that it would be interesting to clarify which fields are more supportive of this reform and which maybe you have found more reluctant. Maybe Ragnar?
Yeah, we have some research on that, and the two obviously suspects are the economists and medicine. So that's a short answer. I think that is recognizable. Might be also, yeah.
Yes, Andreas.
May I add the laws?
The law, yeah.
Yeah, the law faculty. Two.
These are disciplines that are in love with their journals.
And an interesting question also about something that maybe we haven't talked a lot about, which is the frameworks. So the national frameworks, national legislation. Irene mentioned in her presentation that in their case this was an enabler. But the question is whether there are already established frameworks at your institutions that somehow relate to national law regarding career assessment, and if yes, did you manage to change the law accordingly? So whether this has happened in the opposite direction, let's say. I don't know who would like to reflect on this.
Maybe
2 words about that. We had already the NORCAM framework, and then the government wanted to change the regulations for recruitment of academic researchers. And then we were part of the reference group, making sure that the new regulations should not be hindering the work we did in NORCAM. So we had a good dialogue with that. So it's kind of soft law and hard law in connection.
yes,
And
if I may,
yes.
if I may add, I come from Finland, and in Finland we have a situation where the national law is actually quite open in this. I mean that universities have a lot of autonomy to decide what kind of criteria they want to use for recruitment and so on. So so in theory, universities and universities of applied sciences, they have a lot of freedom, but this again, there's on the other hand, of course, the funding model, which according to universities and universities of applied sciences, then restricts the freedom, because you kind of have to still make sure that you fulfill some performance indicators to have sustainable funding also. But it's an interesting question. We haven't had to change any laws.
Yeah, very interesting. I would like to now move just to the final reflection. So 1 minute from each of you, if possible. If you could recommend one leadership move to make academic career reform stick over the next 2 to 3 years, what would it be? And maybe we can start by Maria.
Yes, by Maria. Yes, well, I would urge leaders to think what they want to achieve with the reform process. I think CoARA has a lot of elements, which is great, a lot of elements that can be followed, but at the institutional level, it may be needed to do some prioritization, what your organization especially needs and wants to be focusing on at this phase, and start designing and implementing these, and not trying to do too many things at once.
Prioritization, very important point, yes. If we can continue with Andreas, maybe one last future looking.
I think my advice would be to the leadership level, all leadership levels, is to be brave in going the first step, and not be overwhelmed by possible resistance to this. So the brave heart to go the first step.
Yes, thank you very much. Ragnar?
I think I would advise us to align leadership, formal leadership, with other leaderships, including the HR and the research managers, especially, but also librarians who have been mentioned in the chat. So and be open to the process, being the national chapter or of arena we use for this. We need all partners in this, and also unions and so on. So take the discussion, although they might be kind of difficult sometimes.
And Irene?
Yeah. Given that assessment reform is an iterative, collective and transformative process, and there is a need to balance clear direction and flexibility, a certain national vision and institutional autonomy, guidance and community participation, I think that a key element to keep the reform as part of the institutional values will be maintaining a direction that is clear, but keeping the conversation open and allowing time for the reform to become embedded in the system.
Yes, thank you very much for that final reflection on time, which is normally we try to go too fast, and sometimes processes need a bit more time to consolidate. So thank you very much. I just want to close with a few reflections from the European University Association. We will continue definitely bringing together our work on academic career assessment reform and leadership to continue contributing to these discussions and supporting institutions on how to navigate this transformation, which is clear has many dimensions to it. Currently, the call for participation in EUA's 2027 Leadership Development Program is open. So for anyone interested in learning more about the program, we invite you to join our online dedicated info session on the 1st of June. This conversation does not end here, but we hope that this contributes to your own reflections and ongoing work in your institutions and within your systems. Let me thank once again my colleagues Rita and Julia for their support in preparing and delivering this session. And thank you very much to our speakers for their openness and their insights, and to our audience for your engagement today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.